Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's Simon GT here again, and today we're focused on the DB9. This is going to be one of two videos, I promise, regarding buying and selling of these things. Now, I'm not selling this car, absolutely not, but I did see a huge amount of mistakes being made by sellers of DB9. So I thought I'd do a video later on regarding all the mistakes they made and how you can sell your car so much better, because it applies to almost any car. And at the same time, the primary video, the video I'm going to do today, is on my buying experience. What it was like to actually buy this thing, because it was very comprehensive. And in chatting with a few people afterwards, I'm absolutely staggered that most people buy cars so blind. So I thought I'd go through my experience buying this car, the fully comprehensive experience, so that you can take away just a little bit to help yourself when you're buying another car. Let's go. Now, the very first thing I had to do was actually nothing to do with looking for cars yet. What I had to do first was make sure I had all the websites I needed for later down the track. Now, the very first one is the Aston Martin Technical Hub. Aston Martin run their own website from which you can put in VIN numbers and get all the information you need about a car. It's going to be critical later on. So that was the first thing I did. Next up, I signed up to all of the different car websites. Yes, actually signed up. The reason for this was as soon as a new car came onto the market, I got an alert by signing up to all of them, and probably about 20 different car sale sites. The instant a DB9 came on the market meeting all of my criteria, I got an alert. I knew right away, and I was able to start research on that car immediately. The other thing I had to do was make sure I had ready all the different websites for researching the car from the perspective of things like previous insurance, previous servicing, previous history, previous testing, previous finance, everything. Now here in the UK, there's a dozen different websites I can use that for. Most of them call themselves HPI checks. There's various different names, but that's what you want, is you want a website that can give you all the information about the cars. And yes, I am well aware of the ones that get plugged online all the time. Now, step number 2 for me, what I did was to actually start searching for cars. Now, to do this, I had a maximum budget. Yes, I already had a total max amount that I would pay, and not a pound or a dollar more. So what I did was search for cars using that as my main filter. Then I sorted by distance, because pretty much any car, so long as it was under budget, was a contender, whether it be very close to the budget or well under it. The difference was finding value between the cars. One of the most important criteria to me was location. I wanted to find a car that wasn't absolutely miles away, because if I had found a car that was at the other end of the country, several hundred miles, well, that's just a nightmare to get to. It's a nightmare to inspect. It's a nightmare to do anything with. So finding a car that was much closer to where I am was very important. It wasn't necessarily the case, because you're very limited in your filter results, but I did at least find cars that were much more accessible and I could work with the right kind of trim. Because obviously in my filtering, I was looking for cars with a very specific setup, and I didn't find many. Next up, what I was doing was, in a way, creating a spreadsheet and looking at the differences to try and build some value proposition. In other words, what was the specs of each one? What was the cost of each one? What was I getting for the money for each one? What was the mileage versus specs versus condition? Now, as I mentioned, I had about 5 shortlisted cars, and because of my very specific requirements in looking for a car, not all of them were actually close. Even though I wanted them close, they weren't nearby. So that meant I then had to weigh up another decision, and that was, well, where exactly are these things? And in some cases, that could be used to my advantage. You see, some sellers were so remote that they were struggling to get any buyers. In other words, people just saw the cars as being too far away and weren't bothering with. And that meant sellers weren't selling their car, and they had to lower their prices, or were becoming more motivated to sell. And that could work in my advantage. Now that I have a short list of cars and I've sort of weighed them all up against each other, what I'm going to do is start doing checks. Now, this kind of does cross over in the previous section, because the checks are going to contribute more to your preference of the car. Now, my checks are things like the HPI checks to find out if they've got finance, if they've been stolen or written off, all that kind of information, as well as the Aston Martin Technical Hub to find out what engine is in these cars because I needed what's called a Cologne engine, not the Cosworth engine. I'm going to do another video explaining the details on that because it is a huge, massive thing inside the Aston Martin owners community. But for now, I wanted a Cologne engine, and that meant identifying the engine, and I could do that through the Aston Martin Technical Hub. I could identify its MOT history and really weigh up if there'd been any problems with it, ongoing or ignored, or if it had been looked well after based on the MOT history, if it had ever been sawned. If I could find out all sorts of information about the car, and I did it for all of them, comparing them one against each other, and even writing one or two off after finding out about issues that the sellers weren't disclosing. Next up, I started getting, well, very nitpicky. What I did was look through each of the adverts of the cars that I was interested in and really start doing a deep dive on how well they've been written in terms of what I needed to know. So there are a number of cars which unfortunately gave me no information. And I saw this in a ton of adverts. There was so many people writing car adverts which were just horrific. No idea what they were talking about. In some cases, they couldn't even spell properly. When I say spell, I mean DB9. People couldn't put 3 letters together correctly. They couldn't tell me information. I read a ton of nonsense. I got sick and tired of reading all the nonsense associations to James Bond. I don't care about any of that, and I'm sure as hell not going to believe when somebody tells me one elderly lady owner for 20 years. What I need to know is information about the car. So the adverts which gave me all that, well, they came straight to the front because that meant that the sellers were far more trustworthy, far more transparent. They're giving me all the information I need off the bat. So any signs that these sellers were hiding information? Well, that was a bit of a red flag. I wanted to know everything about the car, and I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that they put that in the advert for a car like this. Now, the other thing I was doing, and this is really just part of the business game, if you like, is I'm looking at the profiles. I'm looking at the reputation of the people selling these cars. Most of them were traders. I was kind of preferring to buy this from a trader, not a private individual, and we'll go through why at another time. But I would look up the profiles of the traders to actually see what are they like? What's their reputation? Are they any good? Have they got a good reputation or bad? What are some of the examples? Now, every trader will have at least one bad review. You can't get away from that. That's the nature of the game. So some will have a lot, some will only have a few. And I was looking to see that overall, the traders that were selling the cars that I was interested in had, generally speaking, a good reputation. I did find one was selling an astonishingly good car, but they had a very strong reputation. In fact, they had a police record for selling stolen, financed, and various other fraudulent cars. So I had to steer clear of that trader. And that was why you do your research on the trader. One decision I made fairly early on was that I was going to essentially disregard any cars that were for sale on social media. I wasn't interested in buying a car that was listed on, say, Facebook alone because, well, unfortunately, things like Facebook Marketplace are so filled with fraud and scams and all sorts of stuff that goes on in there that you just can't trust it. I found a number of very good cars that were only on Facebook, nowhere else, just absolutely nowhere. And that made me a little nervous because if they are serious about selling a car like this, why is it not listed on the really big premium prestige websites? Why was it only on Facebook? And then when I dug deeper into some of the owners, some of the people who are selling, the misinformation was just nonsense. One person had a wonderful DB9, but unfortunately they claimed it was their personal car. A little bit of investigation turned out it wasn't. They barely owned the car. They lied about owning it for years, and they were in fact just a trader on the side, and they were selling sort of one car a week, and they didn't disclose this. They wanted to pretend it was their own car, and they wouldn't send anywhere near enough pictures about the car. So that was another one to wipe out. Anything on social media, I seriously recommend you do not touch it. If you do, be very cautious and really dig deep into the car and the profile of the seller. Next up, I went looking for running costs and also repair costs and all the associated costs in owning and operating a car like this. I wanted to get the official figures. Now, that meant going and getting an insurance quote for more than one car. Yes, I actually got quotes on about 4 cars to see whether or not I could afford it under the insurance. And I was very surprised at how affordable they were. In fact, insuring this car was literally 1/4 of insuring the Kia Stinger. Yes, this car cost 25% the insurance cost of the Kia Stinger. It was a no-brainer. And then I started looking at what it would cost to repair common parts. So for example, if I have an issue with the windscreen, if I have an issue with the brakes, if I have an issue with any sort of common failure parts on these cars, what's it going to cost me? How hard is it to fix it? And what do I need to do? Where can I get parts? All of that associated stuff. And of course, petrol. What's this thing like? What's it going to run on? How am I going to find petrol for it? That sort of thing. And all of that came out pretty well on top. Getting fuel for these things is incredibly easy. So here in the UK, these things use the highest grade of petrol. We call it 99 RON or better. It works brilliantly on that and it's abundantly available. Insurance is quite low. I've got an extended warranty on the car, and overall, the running costs and repair costs, they're not too bad. But there is a big reason why I say that. You see, I would never buy one of these on a passing fancy. If you're not so much a car enthusiast and you're just thinking to yourself, I think I like a DB9, they look good, maybe I should just buy that one that's been sitting on the forecourt for a couple of months, I would not do it. I really wouldn't, because you really need to be a car enthusiast. You really need to be prepared to throw yourself into the deep end with cars like this. Because the next thing I did was I kind of gave myself a reality check. I went and said, okay, if I went to Aston Martin, what were the costs to do work on this thing? And they're off the charts. They're insane. So I then went online to the various forums and sites and all over the place and said, well, what's a real world test? If I didn't actually go to Aston Martin, they're independent dealers. Can I DIY? What can I do on this car? And the answer came back an overwhelming yes, in terms of don't take it to Aston Martin. There are a million better ways to do things on this car. In fact, a huge amount of it can be done by yourself. And there's even a massive list of alternative shared parts. Yes, they're the same parts that Aston charge. They just put an extra 0 on the end because it's Aston Martin. But unfortunately for them, most of the parts, well, they came from other groups, shall we say. It had all sorts of parts from when it was owned in the Ford era. Next up, I had to tackle, well, one of the real problem areas for Aston Martin. You see, cars like this have their value in their service history. Yes, very seriously, a huge amount of value in a DB9 is tied to its service history. And that's a little crazy to me. It doesn't need to be that way. It shouldn't be that way, but it is that way. So a car which has full Aston Martin service history, that's never missed a beat and only ever gone to Aston Martin, gets a huge amount more value. A car which has only seen independent services, well, unfortunately, it loses a lot of value. And a car which has skipped or not had servicing, it's a colossal drop in value. And the problem with that is that most of the servicing requirements on this car are often overkill. You can get away with skipping them, especially if it is a collector's car like this one. This car has very little mileage on it. It's been a garage queen. It's been extremely well maintained. It's had an extraordinarily low amount of mileage per year, and it's been looked after in what I assume was a collection. The problem with that is that the owner, well, they didn't want to take it to Aston Martin every single year. So they actually did some of their own service work in their own workshop because they were very proficient. But of course, that means it doesn't get an Aston Martin service stamp. And if it doesn't get a service stamp, well, it was pretty much condemned. Now, if I go back to the community and say, hey, mine was self-serviced for years by a very good mechanic, but he did it on his own and there's no service stamps, they don't care. They will condemn the car. So I had to be comfortable with this car not having a full Aston Martin service history. And to be honest, I am. I've been through the car myself. I don't believe there's any major faults with it. There's no evidence of it whatsoever. All the evidence is that it's an extremely well looked after, well cared for car. But yes, it has some independent history and some skipped history. And that means I had to get to the point of reviewing the car, assessing the car, and being comfortable with that. If you're not a car enthusiast, if you're not prepared to do the work to investigate that, I would honestly suggest go down the route of looking for full service history. Another big thing to be aware of with these cars, and I had to really work out, was that a lot of cars like this, prestige cars, they do not sell anywhere near as fast as standard mass-produced cars. So for example, your Toyota Aygo or Corolla, your Ford Focus or your Ford F-150s, they sell like that. These cars, they don't sell very fast at all. In fact, they can take a long time to shift, and that does depend on location again. A car that's for sale in New York or London or Sydney can move a lot faster than a car that's on sale in the middle of absolutely nowhere. You need a good pool of buyers to be able to come and look at the car and, of course, have the available income to do it. But it does represent a double-edged kind of sword, because if a car like this has been on the market for 3 months, well, that could be very normal. On the other hand, if it's been there for 6 months or a year, well, there might be some reasons why. What you need to do is really dig into it, and that's what I had to do, was really dig into the history of the car, go through everything, all the MOT history, assess every photo, every bit of information, everything I could to try and figure out why would this car not be selling for so long. Now, this one wasn't actually on sale for that long. I got it relatively quickly, but there are DB9s out there that I've seen on the market for literally years and they can't shift. Sometimes it's not the car. Sometimes it's got nothing to do with the car at all. It can be due to location. In other times, it can be because the seller is just a complete a-hole. Sometimes they're so hard to deal with that you just walk away to another car, or in some cases, they just refuse to accept market price and want thousands and thousands and thousands more than what their car is worth. Next up, I'm now thinking, okay, if I were to buy this car, what am I actually going to do with it? In other words, are there any plans for it? Am I going to keep it as is? Or am I going to make changes to it? Does it need work? Do I need to do things on it? For example, has somebody removed the cats on it, changed the exhaust? What's been done on it? What do I need to do to get it to where I want it to be? My plans, because obviously my plan is to use the car. Purpose will be to kind of lightly, if not moderately, use this car for touring purposes. I want to do rallies and runs and shows. I want to use this car for the fun that it can bring me. Now, in doing that, there's a couple of things I wanted to do. Do I need to wrap it? Do I need to change the brakes? Do I need to fix anything? So I had to find out all information about whether it's suitable for that. Can I use it for all of that? And on top of it, do I need to repair anything or do anything afterwards? And all of that comes into the price, because I had to work out, if I take it somewhere to wrap it, what's the cost versus doing it myself? How hard is it to do? Because I have wrapped half a car before, and my plans are to wrap this one entirely myself. Now, having been through the car from end to end before I've actually seen it, this is all assessed via pictures and in some cases early communication with the sellers. Every case, I've been through the cars left, right and center, identifying anything and everything I could. It was now time to go and actually see the real cars, to sit in them, to drive them, and to see what they were like. That was the next crucial big step. So I did exactly that. Now, I won't go through what to look for on a test drive, because that could be a video series in its own. I'll let other people do that because it's very extensive. But in short, that's what I did. I went and test drove several cars, and I'm looking for faults. I'm looking for stuff that's not being told to me. I'm looking for modifications, changes, weird sounds, all the sorts of stuff that you look for on a test drive, and general walk around of the car. I was looking to see, have I been told something different to what it actually is? And also, what does it drive like? Am I gonna actually be happy with this thing? And driving these things, the very first thing that happened was the memories, the association of driving those big, powerful NA engines is unbeatable. It is just something different. After being on turbo cars for so long, having a naturally aspirated engine again, V12 6 litres, oh my God, these things just sound amazing. They look amazing, and I can't recommend them enough. Now, at this point, I've done a staggering amount to understand the cars on the shortlist. I've test driven them. I've gone through their entire MOT history. I've walked around them. I've looked for modifications. I've seen how they drive. I look for problems. I've gone through every aspect of their history. I've weighed up the future costs, their running costs. I've done everything I possibly could to understand what's going to happen. And I've also had to compare them to one another, because obviously I've got more than one car I'm looking at. So I'm comparing this one versus another car, versus another car, versus another car. And the whole idea was to come out with a kind of decision as to which was the one I wanted to pursue. And that was this one. Now, there was one last thing, and this is a contentious one. This is actually on paper, something you should always do every single time, but in practice, it's very difficult. And that is a pre-purchase inspection. Now, when it comes to an Aston Martin, if you go to the community and you ask anyone about buying it, they will tell you, take it to Aston Martin and get a pre-purchase inspection on it. And if you say anything other than yes, you will be abused. It is just considered pretty much mandatory in the community that you get PPIs done on this car. They will never talk to you unless you do that. However, unfortunately, the reality, it's just not that simple. See, the problem with getting a PPI on this particular car was, well, unfortunately, Aston Martin are nowhere near where it was being sold. This car was on sale in a location where the nearest Aston Martin dealership was a good, probably 150 miles away. There was nothing nearby from Aston Martin to actually get this assessed. So I couldn't get it there. They suggested that in order to get a PPI, that I ask the seller to give me the car for 2 days, take it down to them, and the cost was over £1,000 for an Aston Martin PPI, in which I had to convince the seller to either pay for or pay out of my pocket, and at the same time, lose the car for 2 days. Now, typically, this is something no seller will ever sort of agree to. They're not going to pay for your PPI, and they sure as hell don't want you taking their car away for 2 whole days. So it was never really going to be possible for me to get an Aston Martin tech to do a PPI on this car. I asked if I could get mobile service out, but they just wouldn't go that far. The seller was okay with it, I'll make that clear. The seller was happy for me to do it, but there was going to be extra fees on it simply because they're taking it away for 2 days, not getting a tech come out on site as usual PPIs do. And that's the next problem. Now, of course, I didn't have to use an actual Aston Martin tech to do a PPI on this. You don't have to do that. There are a ton of companies out there that will do PPI for any car you like. The problem with these guys is they're not Aston Martin specialists. None of them are. Some of them are very, very good, but when it comes to knowledge of this, really only Aston Martin can do the full deep dive into the car. And to be honest, most of what they were going to do was sort of what I'd already done. So getting an independent or private non-Aston Martin tech to come out and do a PPI on this car, well, that just felt like a total waste of time because they don't know the cars well enough. They were going to check the same things I'd already checked. Yes, they have some equipment to do a few more checks, but I'd already been through this with a code reader and various tools to actually scan it myself. And I felt very comfortable this car was not requiring a PPI, but that was my personal understanding of the car. I'd urge you, if you can't do that, to get a PPI on it. What I did was to make sure in my own mind that the probability that this car would pass a PPI was so high that it just wasn't worth taking it to Aston Martin or bringing in another pre-purchase inspection. Because yes, I was even able to put this up on a hoist and look around underneath it myself with my own tools inside and out of this car. I was quite happy not to do a PPI. But that's not the case for most Aston Martin buyers, and I urge you to seriously consider it if you can do it. The only last thing I will say about PPIs, and I'm going to get to this point in another video because this is a really, really big point. When it comes to taking anything to Aston or working with the Aston community, they are, how do I put this politely, purists, perfectionists, and very pedantic. If you take this car to Aston Martin, I guarantee you they will find faults which are really technically not faults. They will find anything and everything and really hype it up like it's the end of the world. You're going to get the same with pretty much the entire community. The smallest little imperfections in these cars are pretty much crucified by the majority of owners. The owner base for the typical Aston Martin DB9s are people who never drive them. They are, again, purists, perfectionists, and very pedantic. Now, at this point, I was just about there, but there was one very, very critical step to do first. And this is a step you should do with any car that you're buying. What I did was get the trade valuation for this car, not just from one site, but from dozens of sites. I was looking to find out, now this is important because that value is essentially the trade-in price, what the trader paid for it, what they spent on it. And from that, you can then say, well, if they're asking for 30,000, but the trade-in is 20, well then there's a £10,000 markup on the car. Here in the UK, for most mass manufactured cars, most traders are trying to make about £3,000 or £4,000 over the trade price when they sell it. So for example, a car might cost them 10,000, they're looking to sell it for sort of 13 or 14. Now that scales up the more expensive the car gets. So a car like this, they're expecting to make more. And to be honest, on this car, I was probably anticipating around £5,000 to £7,000 profit for the dealer, because, well, they've got a lot of extra keeping costs with a car like this, so they want some profit out of the car, and that's absolutely fair enough. But if they're asking for, say, 15 or 20,000 over the trade value, they better have some damn good reasons why the cars are so expensive. Now, the dealer that sold me this car was asking, frankly, a little too high an amount. And I was able to point out to him that the trade value of this car was a lot lower than what he's selling for, and it seemed a little unreasonable for it. So we have a back and forth discussion on why this car was so much more and where he could cut some costs in it. So in the negotiation, we went back and forth on the price of this car. And one of the things we worked out was, okay, the dealer sort of had a base price and they just couldn't go below that. I wasn't too happy about it, but there were two things that I had to factor in. And the first was the dealer could do some value add-ons for me for this car. See, the dealer could buy tires a lot cheaper than I could. The dealer could get a detailing done much cheaper than I could. The dealer could buy an extended warranty much cheaper than I could. So he could offer me these extras that gave me a hell of a lot more value in the car and didn't see him losing too much price in it. So I was able to get some extra add-ons for this car that other traders might not have been able to do. Most cars in the UK, you should expect to be able to negotiate between 5 and 10% off a car. Sometimes some dealers just won't. It does depend on the dealer and the car, but by all means, every car you see listed, you should be able to expect between 5 and 10%. Any more than 10 and you're really getting into cheeky territory. But certainly asking 5% off the value of a marked car, that's very fair. Obviously, if you're buying an extremely cheap car, it's a little more difficult for the trader, but for typically priced ordinary cars, yeah, 5 to 10% off is a very reasonable asking amount. Now, there was one other reason why I did pull the trigger on this car, and this is probably a discussion for another video, but in short, I truly believe that this car, it's hitting the bottom of its depreciation curve. I really think this car's only got 1 or 2 more years of depreciation in it, and I intend to own this car for a lot longer than that. And I may already be being proven right. The market is starting to suggest that not only these are hitting the bottom of their curve, but these are going to spring up. These are going to go right up. In fact, I have had a valuation done on this car, and the valuation has come in and said, well, as long as you repair these 1 or 2 little items on it, which I already knew about, this car could be worth a massive amount more than what I paid for it. So yes, I took a bit of a gamble here on the basis that I paid slightly over what I wanted to pay. It was still within my budget. I got a bunch of value add-ons because the dealer couldn't lower his price anymore, but he could offer me things that would cost me more than it would him. And I gambled that this is going to appreciate because I truly believe these cars will, in the near future, rocket up. To put things in context, this is a DB9. Its main competitor at the year of manufacture was the Ferrari 599. This car is its direct competitor. It's absolutely amazing, and I expect this thing at some point to blow up in price. Now, having decided to actually pull the trigger, we're doing it. We've bought this car, we're essentially done. There was one very, very critical thing I had to do at the last minute, and you do need to do this at that very last stage, just before you pay, but as you agree to buy it. What you do in the UK is called a HPI check. Now, the same thing exists around the world. Australians, I'm sorry, I've forgotten what it's called in Australia, but the system is the same. You can actually buy a car check if you like. And this check here in the UK, known as HPI, it will protect you. It will give you information about the car that it will insure against. So for example, it will tell you this car is officially not stolen. It will tell you officially this car has no finance on it. And it will back it up to the value of the car if they're wrong. So what that means is you run this check on the day you buy it and it all comes back clean, not stolen, not insurance write-off, nothing. It's all perfect. And then the very next day, unfortunately, a flag for stolen gets put on it. Well, if you've bought a HPI check or you've bought one of these car checks, what happens is they will say, we will insure you against that and we will make sure you get your money back. If you haven't done that check and you buy something stolen, you can lose the lot. But it is important to make sure that when you buy those checks, you buy them to the value of the car, because some of those checks, well, they'll only indemnify you, they'll only protect you up to say a few £1,000s or a few $1,000s. You need to make sure you're buying one that will protect you 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, or even 100,000 if you need it. And the rest is history. We took the Stinger down, we dropped it off, took this one away, and the DB9 was mine, and the Stinger is gone. Now, I don't regret it at all, to be honest. I really don't. The Stinger was by far and away one of the best cars I've ever owned, but its opportunities for use were so limited. I couldn't take it on runs, I couldn't take it on rallies, I couldn't really do anything good with it. Already, this car, I've had invites to go on supercar tours, to go on rallies and runs with some very, very cool cars. As soon as you get one of these, the doors open into the car community that you just didn't get with the Stinger. Nobody wanted the Stinger. Everybody wants to see this one. This one sounds phenomenal. It drives like an absolute beast. I love this thing and I cannot wait to get into it and make more changes. But for now, that was the process of me buying the DB9. Now, there was much more to it that I could go into much more details, but in order to keep this video relatively short, that was the process. Yes, there's a lot more I could explain, but we'd be here for hours if I did that. For now, welcome the DB9 to Simon's GT Garage. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed any parts of this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and I'm going to see you in the next video when I talk about all the mistakes I saw sellers making with cars like this and exactly why I passed on so many cars and chose this one, because so many sellers just got it so wrong. But that's for the next video. Thank you again so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you in the next video. Simon out.